The morning sun bathed the streets of Maplewood in a warm golden hue as 10-year-old Olivia Carter walked briskly towards Willow Creek Elementary. She loved mornings like this, crisp, fresh, and full of possibilities. Her backpack bounced lightly on her back as she hummed a tune she had learned from her mother the night before. Today was supposed to be a good day. Olivia had always loved school. She wasn't just an excellent student. She genuinely enjoyed learning, solving math problems, and reading stories that transported her to different worlds. Most of all, she loved the sense of accomplishment that came with understanding something new. But more than anything, she loved making her mother proud. Her mother, Lisa Carter, was a hardworking single parent who had sacrificed so much for Olivia. She worked long hours at the local diner, barely making enough to keep them afloat. Olivia knew how hard her mother fought to give her a better life, so she made sure to do well in school. She was always on time, always did her homework, and never caused trouble. But today, trouble found her. The morning classes passed by as usual. Olivia sat at her desk, taking careful notes as Miss Simmons, her teacher, wrote on the chalkboard. Miss Simmons was one of those teachers who never smiled. Her eyes were always sharp, her voice clipped and cold. Olivia had never seen her be openly cruel, but there was something about her that made Olivia uneasy. Just before lunch, as Olivia reached for her water bottle, disaster struck. The bottle slipped from her small hands, landing on her lap. Water splashed everywhere, soaking her beige uniform pants. The class went silent for a second before a few giggles erupted. Olivia's cheeks burned as she tried to pat herself dry with a tissue, but the damage was already done. The dark stain on her pants was unmistakable. Her heart pounded as she quickly raised her hand. "Miss Simmons?" she whispered, barely audible. Miss Simmons turned, her expression unreadable. "Yes, Olivia? I had an accident," Olivia stammered. "Not like an accident, but I spilled water on myself. Can I go to the nurse's office to get a change of clothes?" Miss Simmons folded her arms and let out a sigh. "Olivia, you need to be more careful. This is your own doing." "I know," Olivia said quickly, "but I just need a new pair of pants. Please." Miss Simmons stared at her for a long moment, then shook her head. "No, Olivia. You'll have to deal with the consequences of your actions. You can't just leave class every time something minor happens." "But I don't want to hear it. Either sit down or go home. Those are your choices." A cold pit formed in Olivia's stomach. Go home? That didn't make sense. She didn't live close by, and her mother was at work. But the alternative, sitting in class like this with everyone staring at her, was unbearable. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her backpack. Miss Simmons gestured to the door. "Go on, then." Olivia hesitated. "Can I at least get something from the lost and found?" Miss Simmons narrowed her eyes. "No, you've wasted enough time already." With her head hanging low, Olivia clutched her backpack tightly and stepped out of the classroom. As she walked past rows of desks, she felt the weight of curious stares on her. A few kids whispered to each other. Others snickered. Her legs felt heavy as she made her way down the hallway, past the office where the kind secretary, Mrs. Thompson, usually sat. Olivia considered stopping there to ask for help, but a sense of defeat settled over her. If Miss Simmons had refused to help, why would anyone else? The moment she stepped outside, a cold gust of wind hit her bare legs. She shivered as she pulled her long sweater down as much as possible, hoping to cover herself. The sidewalk felt endless as she walked home, her face burning with humiliation. She kept her gaze fixed on the pavement, hoping no one she knew would see her. Cars passed by. Some slowed down slightly, as if the drivers were confused by the sight of a little girl walking alone, her pants missing. Olivia's breath hitched every time someone looked her way. She wished she could disappear. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away. She had to be strong. She had to make it home. By the time she reached her apartment building, her legs were numb from the cold, and her heart ached with a pain she couldn't quite describe. She hesitated before stepping inside, knowing that her mother would be furious. Not at her, but at what had been done to her. As she walked into their small living room, her mother, Lisa, turned from the kitchen. She had just come home from her morning shift, still wearing her diner uniform. The moment she saw Olivia standing there, pantless and shivering, her face contorted with shock and anger. "Olivia? Baby, what happened?" Lisa rushed to her daughter, kneeling in front of her, eyes scanning her from head to toe. Olivia sniffled, trying to stay composed. "Miss Simmons made me go home. I spilled water on my pants, and she wouldn't let me change." For a moment, Lisa didn't say anything. Her lips parted slightly, as if trying to process what she had just heard. Then, slowly, her expression changed, from shock to fury. "She sent you home like this?" Lisa's voice trembled. Olivia nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't know what to do." Lisa pulled her daughter into a tight hug, stroking her hair. "Oh, baby, I am so sorry." Then she stood up, grabbed her phone, and dialed a number with shaking hands. "Who are you calling?" Olivia asked, wiping her tears. Lisa's eyes darkened. "Your father." Olivia's breath hitched. Her father, a man she had never met, a man whose name she only heard whispered in passing conversations. Lisa put the phone to her ear. "Marcus, you need to hear what happened to your daughter." The moment the name left her lips, Olivia felt a strange shift in the air. She didn't know much about her father, but she knew one thing. He was not someone people messed with, and Miss Simmons was about to regret ever crossing him. Lisa Carter paced the small apartment, her fingers gripping the phone so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her heart pounded in her chest, anger boiling beneath her skin. Olivia sat curled up on the couch, her tiny hands trembling as she hugged her knees. Lisa had never seen her daughter this shaken before, and it tore at every fiber of her being. The moment Marcus Carter's name flashed on the screen, Lisa pressed the phone to her ear. "Lisa!" His deep voice came through, calm but firm, carrying the same weight it always had. "She sent her home without pants, Marcus." Lisa's voice cracked, her fury barely contained. "A teacher sent our daughter home, alone, in nothing but her underwear and a sweater. A 10-year-old child." Silence. A long, heavy silence. Then came his voice, lower this time, controlled yet dangerous. "Where's Olivia now?" Lisa glanced at their daughter, who was curled up on the couch, her eyes puffy from crying. "She's here. She's safe." But Marcus, she had to walk home like that. She was humiliated. Another pause. Then a quiet but firm declaration. "I'm on my way." Lisa exhaled, trying to steady her racing heart. "Marcus, don't do anything reckless." "I won't," he said, "but I will make them regret it." Lisa didn't argue. She knew Marcus well enough to understand that when it came to his daughter, there was no force in the world that could stop him. Lisa sat down next to Olivia, stroking her daughter's hair. "Your dad's coming, sweetheart." Olivia sniffled, looking up. "Mom, is he mad at me?" Lisa's heart clenched. "Oh, baby, no, he's mad for you. No one should have treated you like that. And he's going to make sure it never happens again." Olivia wiped her nose on her sleeve. "You always told me Daddy was busy, that he had important work." Lisa hesitated, then nodded. "He does. Your dad. He fights for people who don't have a voice. He's helped a lot of people, Olivia, and now he's going to help you." She didn't tell Olivia everything, though. She didn't tell her that Marcus Carter wasn't just any lawyer. He was a high-profile civil rights attorney, known for taking on some of the biggest racial discrimination cases in the country. Lisa had always kept Marcus at a distance, not because he was a bad father, far from it, but because his work was dangerous. He had powerful enemies. He had received death threats, and Lisa had made a choice to keep Olivia away from that world. But now Marcus was needed, and when Marcus Carter was needed, people listened. 20 minutes later, the roar of an engine echoed outside. Lisa glanced out the window and saw a sleek black car pull up to the curb. The driver's side door swung open, and out stepped Marcus Carter. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a sharp navy suit. He was the very picture of power and authority. His dark eyes burned with intensity as he strode toward the apartment. People on the street noticed him. Some whispered his name, others instinctively stepped aside. Marcus Carter was a man who commanded attention, whether he wanted it or not. Lisa barely had time to open the door before Marcus stepped inside. The moment his eyes landed on Olivia, his entire demeanor softened. "Baby girl." His voice was gentle now, a stark contrast to the storm brewing behind his eyes. Olivia hesitated for only a second before running into his arms. "Daddy." Marcus held her tightly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I'm here, sweetheart. I've got you." As he pulled back, he took in the sight of her tear-streaked face, her small hands still gripping the hem of her oversized sweater in an attempt to cover herself. Something dark and dangerous flickered in his eyes. "She made you walk home like this?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried a weight that made the air in the room feel heavy. Olivia nodded. "I spilled water on my pants. I asked if I could change, but Miss Simmons wouldn't let me. She said I had to go home instead." Marcus inhaled slowly, as if physically restraining himself. Lisa placed a hand on his arm. "Marcus, what are you thinking?" His jaw clenched. "I'm thinking this school has just made the worst mistake of their lives." Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Elliot," he said as soon as the line connected. "I need you to do something for me." Lisa recognized the name immediately. Elliot Grayson, Marcus's longtime legal associate, a powerhouse in his own right. Marcus's voice remained calm but carried an undeniable authority. "I need every detail on a teacher named Miss Simmons at Willow Creek Elementary. Her employment history, disciplinary records, anything we can use." Pause. Then, "Understood." Marcus ended the call and turned to Lisa. "Tomorrow morning, I'm taking Olivia to school myself, and we're going to have a little chat with Miss Simmons." Lisa crossed her arms. "Marcus, you're not just going to talk, are you?" A ghost of a smirk touched his lips. "I never just talk." Olivia looked up at him. "What's going to happen?" Marcus knelt down, cupping his daughter's face in his hands. "What's going to happen," he said softly, "is that no one will ever treat you this way again. Ever." Olivia searched his eyes, then nodded. Lisa let out a slow breath. She knew Marcus well enough to understand one thing. Miss Simmons was about to regret everything. The next morning, Marcus Carter stepped out of his car, his presence radiating authority. Dressed in a sharp black suit, his shoulders squared, his eyes cold with determination, he held Olivia's small hand in his as they approached the front entrance of Willow Creek Elementary. Lisa walked beside them, her face tense with unspoken fury. The school doors opened automatically as they stepped inside. The hallway was already filling with students, but the moment Marcus entered, heads turned. Parents waiting by the office counter exchanged glances, whispering amongst themselves. Even some of the teachers walking by stiffened at the sight of him, sensing something was about to unfold. Marcus didn't hesitate. He walked straight to the front desk, his voice calm but firm. "I'm here to speak with Principal Owens." The secretary, a middle-aged woman with glasses perched at the end of her nose, looked up, startled by his directness. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" Marcus gave a small, humorless smile. "Trust me, he'll want to see me." The woman hesitated, clearly debating whether to push back. But something about the way Marcus stared at her made her reach for the phone instead. She whispered a few words into the receiver, then nodded quickly. "The principal will see you now," she said, gesturing toward the office door. Lisa gave Olivia's hand a reassuring squeeze before they stepped inside. Principal Owens sat behind his oversized desk, his hands folded neatly in front of him. A man in his early 50s with graying hair and a slight paunch, he had the look of someone who preferred avoiding conflict. Marcus, Lisa, and Olivia took their seats, but Marcus didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I want to talk about what happened to my daughter yesterday." Principal Owens sighed. "Mr. Carter, I understand you're upset, but I assure you, there was no ill intent." "I don't care about your intent," Marcus cut in smoothly. I care about the fact that a teacher at your school humiliated and endangered my child. She was sent home in nothing but her underwear and a sweater. Tell me, Principal Owens, what part of that do you think is acceptable? Owens shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Carter, school policy states that if a child has an accident and does not have a change of clothes. She didn't have an accident, Lisa snapped. She spilled water on her pants. You're telling me your school policy is to strip kids of their dignity instead of finding them something to wear? Before Owens could answer, the office door swung open. Ms. Simmons had arrived. The moment Olivia saw her teacher enter, she shrank slightly in her seat. Miss Simmons, a woman in her mid-40s with short blonde hair and a stern face, didn't look the least bit remorseful. Instead, she crossed her arms and raised an eyebrow. I assume this is about Olivia? She said, her tone clipped. Marcus turned his gaze on her, assessing. You assumed correctly. She sighed. Look, I didn't do anything wrong. The girl needed to go home and change. She couldn't sit in class all day in wet clothes. It was a simple decision. Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. His next words were slow, deliberate. You sent a 10-year-old girl walking home alone, half-dressed, in broad daylight, without calling her parents, without making sure she got there safely. Tell me, Miss Simmons, would you have made that simple decision if my daughter had been a little white girl named Emily or Sarah? A flicker of something crossed her face. Guilt? Fear? I treat all my students the same, she snapped. Marcus smiled coldly. No, you don't. Lisa shook her head in disgust. You didn't even think about how humiliating this was for her. Did you? You just saw a black child and assumed no one would care. Miss Simmons scoffed. Oh, please, this isn't about race. Marcus's expression darkened. Oh, but it is. And you know why? Because if Olivia had been any other student, you would have taken 5 seconds to find her something to wear. You would have let her sit in the nurse's office, or you would have made a simple phone call. Instead, you sent her out into the world vulnerable and exposed. Owens cleared his throat, clearly growing nervous. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Ms. Simmons has been a respected teacher at this school for years. I'm sure she was just following protocol. Marcus turned to him, his voice now quiet, but lethal. Principal Owens, I am one of the most well-known civil rights attorneys in this state. I have spent years fighting against systemic discrimination. And let me be very clear. What happened here wasn't just negligence. It was discrimination and endangerment. If you think for 1 second that I am going to let this slide, you are sorely mistaken. Owens visibly paled. Ms. Simmons, for the first time, looked uneasy. Lisa pressed forward. We want an apology, a written acknowledgement that what was done to our daughter was wrong. And we want to know exactly what disciplinary action will be taken against Ms. Simmons. Ms. Simmons scoffed. You want me to apologize to her? She gestured at Olivia, her face twisted with irritation. Marcus's jaw tightened. No, I want you to realize that your actions have consequences. Because, Ms. Simmons, this isn't over. Owens suddenly looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. Now, let's not escalate this further. It's already escalated, Marcus said coldly. I have every right to take legal action against this school. Child endangerment, emotional distress, racial discrimination. Shall I continue? Owens swallowed hard. That won't be necessary. There was silence. Then, begrudgingly, Miss Simmons exhaled through her nose. Fine. She turned toward Olivia, her posture stiff, and muttered, I'm sorry if I upset you. Marcus's lips pressed into a thin line. Try again. Her nostrils flared, but she must have realized she had no choice. She finally said, I'm sorry for sending you home like that. It was wrong. Olivia, still holding on to Lisa's hand, didn't say anything, but she nodded. Marcus turned to Owens. And the disciplinary action? Owens hesitated. Then, reluctantly, he said, Ms. Simmons will be placed under review. We will be discussing this matter with the school board. Marcus let the weight of his silence press against them before finally nodding. Good. But understand this. If I hear so much as a whisper that anything like this happens again to my daughter or any other child, I won't be walking into this office next time." Owens frowned. "Then where will you be?" Marcus's smile was razor-sharp. "In a courtroom." And with that, he stood, took his daughter's hand, and walked out. Lisa followed close behind. Olivia, now a little taller, a little stronger, walked with her head high. Miss Simmons, meanwhile, sat frozen in her seat. For the first time, she understood. She had just made a very, very big mistake. The events of the previous day had been a whirlwind, but Marcus Carter was far from finished. A simple apology wasn't enough. Not when his daughter had been humiliated. Not when countless other children could face the same treatment if nothing changed. He sat in his home office that evening, his phone buzzing nonstop. Messages from colleagues, friends, and even strangers flooded his inbox. Word had gotten out. Lisa had spoken with a few other parents at the school, and before long, the story had spread like wildfire. Parents, outraged at the treatment of a child, had begun sharing the details on social media. By morning, it was everywhere. A viral tweet read, "A 10-year-old black girl was sent home in her underwear because her teacher didn't feel like helping her after a minor accident. This isn't just negligence. It's discrimination. Do better, Willow Creek Elementary." Within hours, news outlets picked up the story. Marcus wasn't surprised when his phone rang, an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. "Mr. Carter?" a professional voice said. "This is Amanda Jacobs from Channel 7 News. We'd love to have you on our evening segment to discuss what happened to your daughter." Marcus had anticipated this. He had seen enough high-profile cases to know that when the media got involved, things moved fast. He agreed to the interview not for fame, not for publicity, but because the world needed to see what systemic racism looked like in everyday life. Lisa, meanwhile, was monitoring the school's Facebook page, where furious parents flooded the comments. Some shared their own experiences with Miss Simmons, claiming that she had always treated Black and Latino students unfairly. Others demanded answers from Principal Owens and the school board. The pressure was mounting. The following day, a special meeting was called at Willow Creek Elementary. Parents, teachers, and community members gathered in the school's small auditorium. The school board, which usually operated quietly behind the scenes, now found itself under intense scrutiny. Principal Owens sat stiffly at the front, looking exhausted. Next to him sat Miss Simmons, her face drawn and pale. The superintendent of the district, Dr. Evelyn Ross, stood at the podium, clearing her throat. "We want to begin by acknowledging the serious nature of the incident involving Olivia Carter," Dr. Ross said. "Our priority is always the safety and well-being of our students. After reviewing the facts, we have determined that Ms. Simmons violated school policies and failed in her duty as an educator." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Marcus and Lisa sat in the front row, Olivia between them. Lisa reached for her daughter's hand and squeezed it. Dr. Ross continued, "Effective immediately, Ms. Simmons has been placed on indefinite administrative leave while an independent investigation is conducted into her past conduct." Lisa frowned. That wasn't enough. But then, Dr. Ross added, "Additionally, due to multiple complaints from both parents and staff, we will be terminating Ms. Simmons' employment at Willow Creek Elementary." The room erupted. Some parents nodded in agreement. Others, likely those who had never been on the receiving end of discrimination, muttered about it being too harsh. But Marcus knew this wasn't just about Olivia. It was about accountability. Dr. Ross wasn't finished. Furthermore, we are launching a full review of our policies to ensure that no student is ever placed in such a situation again. Starting next semester, all staff will be required to undergo sensitivity and anti-discrimination training. We will also be implementing stricter guidelines for handling situations where a student requires a change of clothes. That was progress. Ms. Simmons, who had been silent throughout the meeting, finally stood up, her face flushed with frustration. "This is absurd," she muttered, shaking her head. "I've worked here for years, and suddenly, I'm the villain?" A few teachers averted their eyes, unwilling to come to her defense. "I didn't do anything wrong," she snapped. I was just following protocol. Marcus turned to her, his voice calm but unwavering. No, Miss Simmons. You were following bias, not protocol. She had no response to that. As she stormed out of the room, the weight of her actions finally seemed to settle on her shoulders. In the days that followed, Olivia was met with overwhelming support from classmates, teachers, and parents alike. Her best friend, Maya, gave her a homemade card that read, "You're the bravest person I know." Some teachers personally apologized for what had happened, expressing their disappointment in their colleagues' actions. Even Principal Owens, after realizing how badly he had handled the situation, wrote a formal letter of apology to the Carter family. But more than anything, Olivia began to heal. One evening, as she sat at the kitchen table doing her homework, she looked up at her parents and smiled. A real, genuine smile. "Thank you," she whispered. Lisa's eyes welled up with tears. Marcus simply nodded, reaching over to squeeze his daughter's shoulder. Justice had been served. But more importantly, Olivia knew she was valued. She knew she was loved. And she knew, without a doubt, that she mattered. The dust had settled, but the impact of what had happened still rippled through the community. Willow Creek Elementary was no longer just another suburban school. It was now a symbol of both injustice and the power of standing up against it. Ms. Simmons had officially been terminated. The school board had made its decision clear, and after the media storm, she had little hope of finding another teaching position anytime soon. Parents at other schools had heard about what happened, and no institution wanted the scandal that came with hiring her. She had tried to defend herself online, posting long, self-pitying messages about how she had been unfairly treated. "I gave my life to education, and this is what I get? People act like I'm some kind of monster when all I did was enforce rules. The world has gone soft." But the comments under her post told a different story. A good teacher doesn't humiliate a child. You're blaming everyone but yourself. Maybe instead of playing the victim, you should reflect on why this happened. No one was on her side. She eventually deleted her social media accounts, disappearing into obscurity, a relic of an outdated mindset that no longer had a place in modern education. Marcus Carter had never intended to become an activist. He was a lawyer, a father, and a man who simply wanted the best for his daughter. But as he sat in his office one evening, staring at the flood of messages from other parents, some thanking him, others sharing their own stories of discrimination, he realized something. This wasn't just about Olivia. This was about all the children who had ever been treated as less than because of their race, their background, or the unconscious biases of those in power. So he took action. He started a campaign to push for better policies in schools, demanding that all teachers undergo annual diversity and inclusion training. He worked with local legislators to introduce a new initiative, the Olivia Carter Act, a policy that ensured no child could be sent home without appropriate clothing or a responsible guardian present. The story gained traction. Other districts began to take notice. Schools across the state implemented new policies to prevent similar incidents from happening again. One father's fight had turned into a movement for change. As for Olivia, the ordeal had changed her, but not in the way Miss Simmons might have hoped. She didn't shrink. She didn't become afraid. She grew. At first, returning to school had been difficult. She still felt the weight of what had happened, the whispers of classmates who now knew her name not because of her grades or her kindness, but because of what she had been through. But something incredible happened. Kids she had never spoken to before started coming up to her. "I think what your dad did was awesome," one girl told her in the cafeteria. "My little brother's teacher was really mean to him once, and my mom used your story to make the school listen," another said. Even some of the teachers treated her differently, not out of pity, but out of respect. One afternoon, as she walked into class, she noticed a new teacher standing at the front. Miss Simmons was gone, replaced by a warm-looking woman with curly brown hair and kind eyes. "Good morning, class," the teacher said with a bright smile. "My name is Ms. Johnson, and I'm so excited to be here." Olivia felt something she hadn't in weeks. Hope. She slid into her seat, her back a little straighter, her heart a little lighter. She was no longer just the girl who had been sent home without pants. She was Olivia Carter, the girl who helped change things. As time passed, life moved forward. But the lesson of Olivia's story never faded. It was a reminder that no one had the right to diminish another person's dignity. That silence in the face of injustice only allows it to continue. And that sometimes all it takes is one voice, one act of defiance, to start something bigger than yourself. And most importantly, no child should ever be made to feel small because of the color of their skin. Justice had been served, but the fight for a better world, that was just beginning.